Thank you so much, Bhavna. It's absolutely lovely to be here. I was extremely worried, as the team knows, about the internet because I'm in the backwaters of Kerala. But cross fingers, it's all worked out, and just beautiful to be here with all of you. I love the prompt. Can you share lessons or learnings? Because it's always a beautiful opportunity for me to step back and say, what's sort of most emerging at this point in my journey? You know, your learnings and lessons keep shifting. But this time, I was very, very excited and feel very privileged to be talking to all of you, because I'm such a huge believer in the power of young people and young women, and the need for leadership. And so thank you for having me here. I thought about this as being sort of, perhaps all of us, you know, we don't know each other, but perhaps this is a shared vision that many of us, this group and beyond, share. How do we lead towards an India really free of poverty and filled with love? So as I thought about that, you know, Bhavna very kindly said, share some lessons. So I'm going to share just 4, and I'm going to share them through a few stories, and then really just open up the time for any questions on your mind, because we'd love to hear what's on your minds as you're graduating from this program as well. But I wrote this in small font because I really have started to believe so much that life is not about big things and big leaps necessarily, but my experience has been that it's about little steps and being really conscious of the things you're learning on those little steps. So here are 4 things for you. This is Pinky, and this was the girl I first met 30 years ago when I started my work, and I walked into a low-income community in Bombay, and I looked at her eyes, and if you look at her eyes too on this slide, they're full of potential. And I got very excited by that potential. And then almost in the same moment, felt very worried, thinking, but what if this child doesn't get the opportunities she needs to unleash her potential? And that's really what started my own journey. And the first sort of learning for me has been, like, believe in really big things, even though it's going to take many, many small steps to get there. And I remember when I first met Pinky, my belief was, but every child in India needs to unleash their potential. But the steps I took were really tiny. I started by just getting 15 kids in a small room in the community and teaching them. I remember a couple of years later sitting in a room with myself saying, like, what do I really want to achieve? Like, what's the big goal? And I called my presentation at that time 10,000 Smiles, because the idea of 10,000 children and reaching them seemed so far away. And yet, when you believe in big things, sorry, you can't see the text here, but today Teach for India runs a fellowship that has graduated thousands of alumni who are reaching, look at these numbers, 3,800 alumni reaching 33 million children. So from that first encounter with Pinky, to that sitting down and saying 10,000 kids seems so unreachable, to where we are today, to really the next dream, which is saying our next dream is to move from 3,800 leaders to 50,000 leaders who work collectively with love to transform 1 in 10 low-income children in our regions through not just literacy, but an education that fundamentally unleashes the potential of self, others, and India. And so my first lesson has always been, don't let anyone stop your dreams. Let your dreams be huge. Like, I remember going into a classroom once and the kids were writing essays on their dreams. And one child, I kid you not, foolscap paper, both sides, full of all the things he wanted to change in the world. And, as an adult, my first instinct was, wait a minute, this is not realistic. How do I get him to like be more realistic about all of this? And then I said, no, like, who am I to curb this child's dreams? If he wants to solve 25 things in the world, bless him, right? Like, we need people like that. So that's sort of the first big learning for me. The second, and this is an image I shot just a couple of weeks ago in Ahmedabad, the man in the picture with the cap on, his name is Uday, and he's a superstar. He's a rickshaw driver who runs his rickshaw without charging anyone anything. So you sit in the rickshaw, you have the most incredible experience. He has magazines, he has snacks, he has all of this stuff in the rick. And at the end, if you choose to pay, you're paying it forward for the next person. He's raised his entire family and done this with this incredible belief in faith, the faith in humanity. My second learning is sparked by him because of the human being that he is. And it's really around the power of learning, that we come into a program like all of you have, or we go to a university, and then at some point we sort of feel, okay, like that's it, But my belief is that like, really, we just need to be learners on the whole journey of our life. We need to be traveling, exploring. And why do we need to learn? This has been a big learning for me. We learn for three things. We learn for ourselves, to discover ourselves, to discover our purpose. And I think a lot of us talk a lot about that. But we also learn how to be with other human beings. You see this, I love this picture because Uday is hugging a child who's got Down syndrome and like works in this vocational center. And look at the love. Look at the love. Like, he's never met this guy before, but look at the love. And so I think we learn because interacting with others in the world is not an easy thing, but it's the most important thing ever. So how do we learn to be more tolerant, more open, more respectful, more loving with others around us? And finally, how do we learn to better discover our purpose? To say, like, we were brought into this world to leave it better, all of us. And we have that capability, and we don't have that capability in the future. We have that capability today. And so really the power of learning was the second one. And I wanted to share an example. A few weeks ago, I was in Bangalore and I was visiting one of our alumni. His name is Santosh, and he runs a beautiful big organization called Mantra for Change, doing some incredible work in school transformation. The story I want to tell you is not about the bigness of his work, though. It's about him as a human being. When the second wave hit, coincidentally, his younger sister, who was pregnant at the time, was diagnosed with cancer, had an unsuccessful surgery, and was left paralyzed from the neck down. And so overnight, Santosh and his beautiful wife, who you see in the picture, started looking after the child, spent 24 hours a day in the hospital with his sister. He was managing Mantra for Change, and he was running a massive relief operation. In fact, the hospital where his sister was, they actually set up an office because he was distributing oxygen and other things in the time of COVID. And I looked at that and I think, it's not so much what he does, but what kind of a human being does it take to operate in that way? And I think that's the power of pushing our ability to learn and our ability to become just the biggest versions of ourselves. And one quick story here, this is Sangeeta, who was one of my Akanksha students. And Sangeeta, when she was about 16 years old, tragically lost the person who was the closest to her in her world. And she was, borderline suicidal, hysterical, and I knew her at that time. And I told her, Sangeeta, we're starting a teacher training program, and you have such a good way with children. Why don't you see if that's a distraction for you, if that can get you through? Long story short, today that's Sangeeta. She runs her own school in her own community, really putting kids on a different life path. That's the power of education. Third lesson, leadership, we all know, but leadership and laddership, both of these make such a huge difference. And when I say laddership, I mean, how can you be a leader who defines your success as how many more leaders have you built? Right? It's not about you. You actually fade into the background, but it's about the people that you empower and believing that these people can be anywhere. The reason I chose this picture, I was in Ahmedabad a few weeks ago, and I walked past these kids and I said, "Kya karta hai?" And they said, "Dukaan banana hai." And I said, "Dukaan?" And then I realized that, when you go to the little shops, you see the chips packets hanging. They were making the chip packets hang, but they had no glue, no adhesive. See the little rocks in the picture? They took the rocks and they were hitting the packets so that the pressure made them stay together. And I thought, what phenomenal entrepreneurship, right? These are little kids on the street. Look at the power of what they're able to do. Look at that idea. These two, I met them when they were 10. On the right is Rehan, on the left is Basit. They live in that community that you see. There are 8 mountains of garbage where they live. But these kids stood up when they were 10 years old. They said, we're going to do something about it. They started lobbying the government to collect the garbage. They set up learning centers for younger children. They did a campaign against junk food. They set up a plant nursery in the community. They were 10 years old. How incredible, the power of what we can do. And then the idea of ladder. So here you see Revant, who was their teacher. That didn't happen by magic. They had Revant and others, many others, and parents and people who served as ladders for them to enable them to think, wait a minute, like my community can change no matter where I live, no matter how big, literally, the mountain is, I can climb the mountain. And finally, my last one, and perhaps my most important, and this was a beautiful moment where some people just took our shoes and made them into a lovely heart. The most important value I've come to learn is love. And this real understanding that we are so deeply interconnected, all of us. One last story to share. This is Priyanka, one of our students, and her mother grew up in a very low-income community in Pune, single mother, father's in jail, serving a life term. And Priyanka came in and I got to know her because I was part of this magical journey with her of a musical where she played the role of a 9-headed snake in a musical called Maya. I remember the intention of Maya was to take kids through a journey of courage, compassion, and wisdom. And one day we visited an old age home in Bombay with elderly people who didn't have limbs. And so it was very difficult for the children. Priyanka formed a bond with an old lady who couldn't speak a word of English or Hindi, so I don't know how they communicated. Fast forward a few months later, we took the children back to that same home. And this time, Priyanka took a bar of chocolate for her new friend, this old lady. And she also happened to have with her on that day a teddy bear that really, growing up with so much instability, was her sense of security. Many of us have had that toy in our lives. So she goes to this elderly lady and she has the chocolate in one hand and she has the teddy bear in the other hand. And this lady, Krishna auntie, took the chocolate very happily and then mistakenly thought that she had brought the teddy bear for her as well. So now what does Priyanka do? This teddy bear is her sense of security. The woman wants to take it. Priyanka hesitates for a minute and then hands her the teddy bear. And afterwards, Priyanka comes to me and she says, Didi, I'm feeling very bad. And I said, Priyanka, why? I said, for a teacher, this is such a glorious moment. Look at the demonstration of compassion, of courage, of all the things that we believe in that you demonstrated. She was 14, Priyanka, at the time. She said, no, Didi, you're wrong. She said, if I really understood compassion, I would not have hesitated. How incredible. So she goes on, Priyanka, gets a full scholarship to the United World College in Italy. Then she goes to Franklin Marshall in the US, graduates from there, chooses to come back and become a Teach for India fellow. And here now you see her working 9 years later since the musical with her own students in a new production that she's on the starting part of her journey. The power of love, the power of interconnectedness, the power of ladders, how we can bring all of those together, belief, leadership, love. Those are really, I think, the big things that I was hoping to share with you today. Thank you so much.